President Obama is in the middle of a historic visit to Hiroshima in Japan to mark both the tragic nuclear bombing of that city more than 7 decades ago, a bombing that killed more than 100,000 individuals, but also to again reiterate that he wants us to move towards a world free of nuclear weapons. However, as he's doing that, we are, as a country, in the middle of a $1 trillion revamping of our entire nuclear infrastructure, from bombs to bombers to submarines and to facilities as well. And so it's a bit of a complicated situation. But before we get to some of those numbers and the revamp, we have a bit of Obama at one of the shrines commemorating those that were killed in the tragedy.
Mere words cannot give voice to such suffering. But we have a shared responsibility to look directly into the eye of history. But among those nations like my own that hold nuclear stockpiles, we must have the courage to escape the logic of fear and pursue a world without them.
So there he makes reference to stockpiles, which we certainly do have. We just alone in the U.S. have about 2,000 nuclear weapons that are ready to deploy in a very short notice. We have about 5,000 that are ready to be deployed once they're put onto missiles and that sort of thing. 7,000 total, more than that in Russia. Some countries, China's got over 300.
Holy shit, Russia's beating us?
They're currently beating us.
Let's get them ready. That's crazy.
On a per warhead basis, though, theirs aren't generally as awesome. Although they have made the largest in world history. And then there's a number of other countries that have any number, from China having several hundred. Israel's never admitted to having them, but they're believed to have something like 80. Pakistan and India
I don't
and all
think
that.
I don't think Israel has any nuclear weapons.
That is what some independent outlets have estimated that they would probably have, but they have never actually admitted to that. But if you've seen that video,
what difference does it make, right? So if Israel has 80 or 8, right? So they drop 8 nukes in the middle of the Middle East, and everybody's screwed, including Israel, right? And what difference does it make if Russia has 10 more, or 100 more, or 1,000 more than us? We both have plenty enough to destroy the entire planet.
Yeah,
so
and
we're covered.
That's true. And look, even the incredible numbers that we and Russia have right now, those represent much smaller numbers after the drawdown of the past few decades. But of course,
that's
globally,
13 times more than the
others combined.
Nuclear powers, the United States and Russia.
Yeah, of course. I mean, in terms of the long-term effects of fallout, the effects on the climate and the atmosphere and all that, there is long-term differences between 8 and 80 or 800 or 8,000. But we still have many, 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 many warheads, as Trump would say. And so it's great to see Obama as an actual sitting president to go there. Previously, I believe Jimmy Carter had gone. He actually met a couple of the survivors. One of the survivors that you saw him, I believe, hugging there in that video, actually maintains a memorial inside of Hiroshima to the 12 American prisoners of war who also died in that blast.
His name is Shigeaki Mori, and he said a great thing because he didn't know he was going to hug Obama or talk to him, and he was like, I know everybody's going to ask me what we said in that conversation. I was thinking it the whole time, but I can't remember.
I'd remember.
But both those guys, both the people he met, they were clearly moved by it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one more point about that guy. For so long, he's actually been trying to get people to recognize the Americans that died in Hiroshima. And under no obligation, he survived the nuclear attack, right? He has every right in the world to say, how about us, right? We lost 100,000 people, including people all around him, right? But he did such an amazing job because I didn't know there was 12 American POWs when we dropped a bomb. Yeah. We're like, oh, there's 12 of our guys down there. Anyway, let's keep going. Yeah. Right?
Thousands.
So we incinerated them. We incinerated them in the middle of that bombing, as we did with 100,000 civilians.
Exactly. Yeah. And as I said, while all this is going on and we're talking about, he's been giving this speech for years that we need to move towards a world without nuclear weapons, and we've moved closer to that since the height of the Cold War, certainly. But the U.S. is planning to spend an estimated $1 trillion for a new generation of nuclear weapons, production facilities, warheads, bombers, submarines, land-based missiles, weapon labs, and more, which is in my opinion, an odd way to move towards a world without nuclear weapons.
Well, those decisions aren't made yet, but the way things are going.
No, but much of that, we are currently spending something like $15 to $20 billion a year as part of that ongoing
if
effect.
we didn't do that, if we just took what we had, we could save $4 million an hour.
Wow, isn't that amazing?
Yeah,
So,
and while still having many, many nuclear weapons ready to be fired at a moment's notice. And that $4 million per hour is for 30 years.
okay, so now I want to give some context here. Now, some of those upgrades.
Bernie Sanders, by the way, was just here. He said every American should be making $4 million an hour.
Hillary Clinton says $2 million an hour.
Exactly. She'll never go to 4. Yeah.
So some of those upgrades have to be done because apparently some of the codes that we have are on floppy disks.
I've got a breakdown of that for you if you
It's
want.
amazing. Okay, here, John, hey, give that
Yeah.
breakdown and then I'll continue.
So part of the core of our ability to handle all of these weapons and bombers and all that, we have the Pentagon Strategic Automated Command and Control System. It's part of a 53-year-old computer network built around the IBM Series 1 minicomputer. It has around the same power as today's Arduino microcontroller boards for homebrew projects, which literally are like people just kickstart things with Arduino. Like they're tiny little things that you can get. The huge 8-inch floppy disks hold 500 kilobytes of data. That's half of 1 megabyte or 1/1000th of a movie. It's a tiny, tiny little bit of data. But, you know, it's not for anything important. It just handles functions related to intercontinental ballistic missiles, nuclear bombers, and tanker support aircraft.
Yeah, but I got you. But there's no sign that it's breaking. In fact, it works incredibly well. We have
Yeah, but the graphics are terrible.
we have 10,000 floppy drives. I know the graphics are so they're like the same in war games. Like that's
Exactly,
what
yeah.
it would be, like D. But
No, we tried to run that game on it. It won't even run it.
I got no interest in us upgrading that. I don't. It works. Stuff wasn't. Well, there was no planned obsolescence. This is a guy that one of these articles said it's worked for 40 years. It'll work for the next 40 years. What do we need to upgrade that for?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it does seem a little weird that the four floppy disks will get you one MP3 song, and we're still running things on floppy disks. Okay, but we can have a legitimate debate about that. Here's what that upgrade wouldn't cost: $1 trillion. Okay, the $1 trillion is to buy more weapons. Keep it real.
We're going to
okay?
upgrade it, and it's going to be too easy, and somebody's going to hit Shift Q, and boom, no Thailand. You know.
Okay, I got it.
What about Shirt World?
Okay, all right.
Thailand, Shirt
Oh,
World?
thank you. Okay.
Oh, I got you. All right, so let's give you context. I can't tell you the number of people I've talked to when I say, you know, when we talk about Bernie Sanders' proposal. By the way, Hillary Clinton has one too, right? But Bernie Sanders' proposal costs a little bit more for a free college education for anybody in America that is willing to do it and did have the ability. Well, that costs too much. Everybody says that's unrealistic. That's not pragmatic. Come on, that's way, way too much. You know how much it is? $75 billion a year. It's a decent sized cost, $75 billion a year. Getting more nukes is $1 trillion. So now there's a measure of costs, but there's not a big brouhaha. There's not a big debate.
How are you gonna pay for that?
How are you going to pay for it? It's not pragmatic. It's not realistic.
Fairy dust.
No. Nukes that hopefully we'll never, ever, ever use, we're willing to spend $1 trillion on.
Yeah.
But educating our own kids, giving them equality of opportunity, and not result, equality of opportunity, the American dream, the thing that this whole country is based on.
Yeah.
Just a fraction of that cost, $75 billion a year. Unrealistic, can't do it. Because the priorities are weapons and not kids.